Welcome to Thus Critique Live today. This is our Monday evening, little village of Asagaon in North Goa going live on the internet on these webinar series. We are actually very lucky to actually continue the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago with Lawrence Liang and Sanjay Bhangar on the idea of surveillance and the surveillance state, especially during the times of the pandemic. And sort of it broadly kind of touched on the ideas of censorship. And our today's discussion is a really interesting discussion. We have a great resource, a great speaker, a great scholar on the subject called Gurshabad from the Center for Internet and Society based in Delhi. And it's really interesting because Gurshabad, and I'm saying this as a lawyer because Gurshabad is actually a computer scientist by training who's often it's lawyers who actually like go into technology field and kind of investigate it. But he's a computer scientist who's actually gone into the legal field to look at how legal policy is being framed around controlling the freedom of internet, if I'm right, Gurshabad. And so it's very exciting. And so we had a lot of discussions about how we'll sort of run today's panel. So I think it's going to be really interesting because Gurshabad is going to do it like a sort of a storytelling of a couple of cases, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting. I think should we start already, Nilankur? The talk?
Yes, please.
So so it's 7:32. I just want to quickly make some rules. The platform Thus Critique is a volunteer support group, and it's entirely self-funded, and we depend on your donations. If you can make a small donation for Thus Critique, we generally recommend 200 rupees per person who attends. You can go to our website, thuslive.com, and make a donation. We also want to thank HasGeek for providing us a platform to host a Zoom webinar. And please follow up on updates. Every Monday, we keep coming with new sessions. And this session also for you, all the people in the audience, this session is also live on Facebook. It's live on YouTube. It's live on Twitter. So we have a multi sort of platform presence today. And so the way it's going to work is Gurshabad is going to take around 30 minutes to take us through this presentation, and we'll start shortly. And if you have any questions, you can use the chat box window that's available to you and send me a message to all panelists. That's also okay. And I'll get the questions and I'll save all your questions, and then I'll sort of direct the questions to Gurshabad once we start the discussions. I hope that's fine. And so Gurshabad, I invite you to start your talk. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alok. Yes, as Alok said, I studied computer science, but I'm now also doing legal research at the Center for Internet and Society. And today I'm talking about something that's particularly close to my heart because I've studied this topic in some detail now from, I think, both legal and technical perspectives. So I'm hoping to share that with you today. Now, is my screen visible? Right? The presentation?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Perfect. Okay, so I will share some stories of web or like online censorship in India. And before that, I wanted to share. So these three books, there's something common in between amongst them. So this is Nasreen's book, and this is the Ramayana, a true reading by Periyar, and the Adivasi Will Not Dance. And I don't know if you've already guessed, but from the sort of topic of the conversation today, but one thing common between these three books is that they were banned by particular states in India. So, and that's West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, and Jharkhand, respectively, from left to right for these books. So let's briefly sort of dive into what the law on banning books in India is, right? Yes. So these, again, there's the Code of Criminal Procedure. It allows state governments to pass orders to ban books in their particular states. And why I'm sort of getting into this before we get into web censorship is for a particular reason, which we'll see in a bit. So the law for banning books states that a state government may ban any book it wishes on certain grounds. They just have to pass a notification, state the ground, state why it's banning the book, and that's done. So after that, the police can enforce this by stopping the circulation or sale of the book. And right, the next section, section 96, is a section on how an affected person can challenge this sort of ban. So any person having interest in the newspaper book, can go approach the High Court and get it unbanned. So there's something else common about these three books, which is that not were they only banned, a little while later, the ban was lifted by these particular states. And that happens because there is a legal procedure to approach the court and get it unblocked. But now let's come to the sort of online world where specifically, if you look at these 4 websites I'm listing, there is a very high chance that you cannot access these websites. And they sort of range from collegehumor.com, which is this US comedy collective, piratebay.org, which is for downloading and sharing content for over torrents, and pornhub.com, which is an online pornography website, and dowrycalculator.com, the story of which I will get to in a second. So clearly very diverse topics, not something tying them together. So let's look at sort of the legal framework that does allow this, and that's 2 sections in the IT Act. And one difference that you will notice from banning books is that, in fact, these are not reasoned orders that will be made available to the public. And therefore, half of what I do and half of what civil society has done is try to gather information on websites being blocked or online content being taken down, because this information is not as readily available as we saw, as in the case of banning books by state governments, for example. And in fact, the regulations that allow the government to block websites have a rule that explicitly says that all such orders will be confidential. So the normal sort of experience of web censorship is, of course, you see a notice like, hey, you are not authorized to access this web page. This web page is blocked on the orders of the Department of Telecom, etc. So in fact, if you try to open one of these websites in your browser now, you may face one of these warnings. So what we noticed was, like, kept happening was there were random news reports that Reddit and Telegram are being blocked, which is not something you'd expect to be blocked, of course. So all of these random stories motivated us. Now, I want to share 2 stories that I really like. One is of indianqanun.org. So every screenshot you see on the right where where the text of some law is pasted is actually a screenshot from indianqanun.org, which is just an open legal database. They scrape orders, allow them for publication. So in the same news report that talked about Reddit and Telegram being not accessible by certain users, if you go to like the 5th or 6th paragraph in the news report, it says, after complaints from Jio's, like, which is Reliance Jio internet users, Indian Qanun founder Sushant Sinha, it says Sharma, but it should be Sinha, said he had been told by Jio that the portal was blocked for 1 day last week due to a government order. So this is what happens, right? Sushant Sinha receives complaints that people using Reliance Jio cannot access indianqanun.org. So he calls up Jio and says, oh, why cannot users access it? And Jio says, oh, we received a government order and we've blocked it. And the next sentence is that by evening, apparently the order was taken back. So Jio is claiming that the government ordered them to block the website, and by the same evening they said, do not block it. Now, of course, we're lucky that it was Sinha, because he later filed, so Indian Qanun filed a right to information request with the Department of Telecom, and the Department of Telecom said, we have no clue why indianqanun.org was ever blocked. We have not passed such an order ever. And so let's come to another website I mentioned, which is dowrycalculator.com. And this website was made by Tanul Thakur, who I think now writes for The Wire and is a film and cinema critic. And this case is also very interesting because when we look at section 69 and 79 of the IT Act, which I talked about, section 69A of the IT Act allows the government to block websites based on national security and those sort of grounds. Section 79 can allow the government to pass an order if it relates to any sort of what are termed as reasonable restrictions under Article 19 of the Constitution. So that is a wide variety of laws, any expression which the government wants to restrict. So 79 allows that. So dowrycalculator.com was a satirical website, which sort of if you went to the website, it had like a nice drop down. You could select how much you earn, and then it told you how much to ask for dowry from your potential brides, essentially. So if you went to IIT, it would be 2 lakhs more than if you went to some other college. So it was clearly a satirical take on the practice of dowry, which I'm sure we all agree is a social evil. And how it got blocked is, coincidentally, I was involved in how this got blocked. My friend found the website and didn't get the joke. I don't have a permission to say her name, so I won't reveal it. But she posted on Twitter, tagged like 10, 15 members of parliament, and finally Jyoti Rao Scindia, who was a Congress MP back then. How things changed. He sort of wrote to Maneka Gandhi, who was the Minister of Women and Child Welfare and Women and Child Development, and basically they asked the Department of Telecom and Ministry of Electronics and IT to ban the website. So that's how easy it was to get the website banned, even though Tanul Thakur had publicly claimed that it is his website, and I think from his tweets, I can only guess that he was finding it funny that the website is being blocked for these absurd reasons. So I talked to my friend, and she's like, "Oh, this is not funny. This is not a joke. If it's satire, like it doesn't come across as satire, etc., etc." And I think, like every conversation, it ended up on the nature of comedy itself. That fight wasn't resolved easily, but 2 weeks later, people found that the website was actually being blocked for them. They couldn't access it from India. Now, let's take a tour into what happened in the 2 weeks, right? So Section 69A is clearly laying out grounds for when a website should get blocked on national security, etc., grounds. And 79 is the broader provision that can allow sort of restrictions on speech. So one of the restrictions that the anti-dowry legislation, the name of which I forget, basically prohibits the promotion of the practice of dowry. And one can reasonably say, okay, that's some restriction on expression that the government has placed. So therefore, Section 79 should have been used, because clearly this is not something related to national security or integrity, etc., etc. So Tanul Thakur files an RTI and gets the response that we can't share the order with you because of the confidentiality rules that have been issued under Section 69A of the IT Act. So they're claiming that a provision that can only be used for national security was used to block a website that serves satirical content on the practice of dowry, essentially. And now, with the Internet Freedom Foundation, of course, Tanul Thakur has gone to the court and everything. So the point of the 3 books that we looked at was that the law is now giving an opportunity for affected people to effectively to challenge the ban and challenge the actions of the state that make certain information or content inaccessible to the public. And Section 69A, in fact, in 2015 was challenged in the Supreme Court for the same reasons, that it's not allowing users the rights to challenge these decisions. And what the Supreme Court said is, there are enough safeguards. The rules say that you should give an opportunity of hearing to the content creator, etc. So we'll sort of let the statute be on the books, and that still exists. But clearly, from these examples, we know that even for famous websites whose owners are out there, who have publicly claimed the website, they are not being contacted if before an order is passed, and basically, that also sort of prompted us to study the problem from a technical lens, because when we discuss the story of indianqanun.org, clearly when the government passes an order, it should be blocked by all ISPs. So it's a strange condition to say that Reliance Jio is blocking it only. And basically, the summation of it all is perhaps that it's such an opaque system that you do not know what's going on. Organizations like the Software Freedom Law Center in India, the Internet Freedom Foundation, and the Center for Internet and Society, where I work, what we've tried to do multiple times is ask the government, what are the list of blocked websites in India? And every time the reply is that we cannot give this to you on national security grounds, or we cannot give this to you because of the confidentiality rule, etc., etc. So one of the things that we still do not know is what are all the websites blocked in India. There is no concrete answer to this. Whereas after digging through some research, you may find analogous answers to what are the books banned in India. In fact, there's a Wikipedia page which sort of documents all of this as well. So basically now we have, from the technical side, we were motivated to study two questions also, which is what methods are ISPs using to block websites? And this is more of a network protocols, etc. discussion, which I won't go into a lot of detail, but we need that to answer the second question. Are all ISPs blocking the same websites? So for all of these that are listed, will you have a different experience if you're using Reliance Jio compared to Vodafone or Airtel? And what we found in the existing literature was that, lots of studies have focused on countries like Iran and China, where there is a centralized model of censorship. So all internet traffic is going through certain routes and traffic. So there's an easier way to sort of implement it uniformly. But the system in India, as I described, the government passes orders to our internet service providers and our telecom service providers, our Airtels and Jios, and then they have to do the blocking. And the regulations also do not talk about how they should block the website. So we wanted empirical data on the questions I just described. So what we started doing is started collecting publicly available government orders, court orders that we could find, and user reports. That is essentially people saying that I was unable to access this website that day, and these were collected by the Internet Freedom Foundation. And we found like 1,000 such URLs. After that, we just sort of took our analysis just to the website level, and around 4,379 websites we found were like potentially blocked in India because, and this number, after that sort of paper I'm discussing was published, we've increased this to around 9,500. And if I'm not mistaken, after including all the new resources we found, it'll be over 11,000 easily. So clearly we've found proof that around 11,000 websites are blocked in India, and we sort of know those names. And we sort of ran tests from popular ISPs such as Airtel, ACT, Jio, Vodafone. And these, I mean, it's a fairly large sample size because these are the most popular ISPs. In the interest of time, I'll skip the technical details, but what the essential part is that we found that ISPs are using whatever method they want to block websites. And the result of which is that there are very arbitrary experiences of censorship. So depending on the method you use, you might actually see a notice, oh, you are not authorized to access this web page, or you might not see, you might see just a web browser error, right? And when we come to what websites are being blocked by these ISPs, we find that the numbers are just extremely different depending on the ISP you're on. So for example, ACT blocks almost double the number of websites that Airtel does from our list. And comparing like all the websites we studied in the 4,300 I was describing, that's only around 27% were blocked by all ISPs. And on the converse, there were at least 200 websites that were only blocked by one ISP. So what you find is that not only is the law opaque, etc., the ISPs are implementing it in such a way that it's arbitrary. Your experience of censorship is arbitrary. There's no guarantee that if you change your internet service provider, you will be able to access the website or not. And in what way? It's very important to users to know that the website was blocked on government orders, and sometimes ISPs are not serving these censorship notices. And this result is also not just for it has policy implications very strongly, because we have net neutrality regulations since 2017-18, which explicitly prohibit ISPs and telecom service providers to discriminate between certain kinds of traffic. So Reliance Jio does not have the authority to arbitrarily block indianqanun.org because it feels like doing that one day. Our net neutrality regulations very clearly prohibit it. So what we have found now is like evidence of the fact that ISPs are maybe violating these website blocking orders by not either fully complying or like complying with orders that have expired, or blocking websites on their own, which is possibly the worst possibility here. So the point of the legal and technical discussion is perhaps that they contribute to each other, which is that you set up opaque processes which have which do not allow parties to be transparent, then your own ability to enforce that regulation is inhibited, and that's what has happened, in my opinion, when it comes to the Indian government and website blocking in India. Lastly, the important sort of aspect is that we deserve better than random outcomes. So clearly, we should have a right to speak out when our content is blocked. So I just talked about web censorship, but the same laws are used to take down online content. So the recent story you might have heard of Akar Patel, who's a former head of Amnesty in India. He called for a protest in a tweet, and that was blocked in India. His account was blocked, and on the orders of the Indian government. Akar Patel never got a hearing, never got an opportunity to ask why the website was being blocked, why his tweet was being taken down, etc. And Akar Patel, I would say, is the most famous person that this has happened to recently, because I think on a daily basis, so many tweets are taken down, and we never hear of them because the person is not as famous, or there was not an accompanying sedition case to sort of make the case famous. So I hope this sort of shed lights on how sort of executive driven this process is, how unilaterally speech is being censored by the central government without any safeguards or transparency or accountability that is given to the users. I'll stop for now, and if I've missed any questions from the chat or something, I'm very happy to catch up on that.
Wow, that was really, really interesting, Gurshabad. Wow, I had no idea. Actually, particularly, I had no idea that you can be so there are different sort of kind of services you use have different censorship games. So I can be using Geo and I can have a totally different experience of the internet. And if I change my provider, and I have a very different experience of the internet.
Yeah, precisely. This is.
I thought there would be uniform government policy on this sort of censorship. So it's really interesting that it's actually not so top down.
Yeah, precisely.
May I ask you a question? Do you think it's as I mean, I'm not trying to be frivolous, but at some level, is it that maybe Geo has formulated some internal policies that are influencing what they think is right to be accessed on the internet or not?
So as I said, maybe before we had net neutrality regulations, this was clear, right? So Geo feels like blocking indianqanun.org, it can do it one day. There's nothing in law prohibiting it from doing it.
Okay.
But now that we have net neutrality regulations, the enforcement of like website blocking becomes an even more important question, right? So you can't discriminate between traffic. Reliance Jio is not allowed to block websites arbitrarily, but clearly the evidence we have gathered shows that something is wrong with the ISPs, right? You're absolutely right. And I think that, as I said, the legal discussion on this has been going on for a while, right? Like people have been saying users deserve rights, etc. But the fascinating aspect is that the government, because of its own secrecy, right, because of its own opaque processes, has made the implementation of its own law weak, which is now that it has no control over what ISPs are blocking. And in my experience, I've seen a few orders that go to an ISP and say, why are you not blocking this website?
So what you're saying is that individual ISP is a self-contained internet sovereign space. Yeah?
I wouldn't go that far, but
I'm trying to be dramatic, obviously.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When it comes to website blocking, ISPs are doing anything, and clearly the government is also not caring enough to fix this problem. We have no mechanism in place to monitor what ISPs are blocking. We at CIS are working on a mechanism so that it allows citizens like us to sort of monitor and collect data on this. But the government hasn't done anything about this. And it's the reason why I compared this to like banning books is right. Clearly, you have so many examples of where books were banned and were unbanned just because of the opportunity of challenge, right? Just because the government is forced to write on paper why they are blocking something, and this opportunity is somehow denied for online content. And
exactly.
And it raises the question of
due process. There is no due process at all.
Yeah.
There's no due process. Is that what you're saying? Am I right?
Yes, there's no due process. The government is taking all these decisions unilaterally, and perhaps this raises the larger question of whether all speech should be treated the same regardless of the media it's on. And the Supreme Court has answered this various times in Cricket Association of Bengal case, and then even Shreya Singhal. It has clearly said that all expression can only be restricted based on Article 19 terms. You cannot say that we will not allow this on the internet because it's a different medium. You have to allow it. And so this sort of leads us to answer the same sort of safeguards should exist. Not sorry.
I can't suddenly couldn't hear you, Gurshabad.
Oh, okay. I was just saying we have to question the government's the law which stands that.
Gurshabad is back.
Hello.
Hi, Gurshabad. Perfect. You're back.
I'm so sorry. There was a power cut.
I wasn't afraid. I thought that since you're a techie guy and you have multiple systems in front of you, you'll just come back. I was going to talk about 19.2 a little bit, because let's read 19.2 since we have a little time, right? Because I'm a lawyer and you're a computer scientist who's brought this really great insight into the law. Now we have you both as a panelist and as an attendee. It's a little freaky. Sorry. So what are the restrictions of freedom of expression, right? Because obviously the exercise of blocking the internet, as the Supreme Court has rightly said, has to be traced back to the Constitution, right?
Absolutely.
And that can only be traced in the limits to freedom of expression in sub-article 19.2.
Yeah.
So the factors we have are basically the following. We have interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states. Okay, so I'm just looking at both the two examples you gave us today, and let's see which applies. Just for fun. Okay, public order, decency or morality in relation to so public order, decency or morality. I mean, clearly, are we dealing with these last three factors in the two cases?
So sometimes what is most apparent to us is what the courts have done in terms of website blocking.
Yeah.
And most of those orders actually relate to copyright grounds and defamation grounds. So someone approaches the court and says, this website is hosting pirated content.
Okay, fine, got it.
And the second most common sort of thing is pornography, which I assume can be related to decency or morality in this list, even though that's legal scholars have made arguments that pornography should not be blocked in India. But I think users will find that a majority of around 800 websites were blocked on government orders after court cases, essentially. So the third most common reason for websites getting blocked is let's get back to dowrycalculator.com, right? And that sort of traces its root to a restriction in the anti-dowry legislation, which prohibits the promotion of the practice. And so the government misread the satire to construe it to be a promotion of dowry. And perhaps this can be linked to public order or decency or morality. I wouldn't say public order, I'm sorry.
Morality.
Yeah, but yeah. So again, very, very tenuous relationships that.
But it's interesting. So help me understand this. For example, what is my right to download? Suppose I was to think in terms of law.
Yeah.
What is my right as an Indian citizen in Indian territory? Okay, using Indian internet, using internet through an Indian ISP. Okay, Indian internet airspace, whatever. What is my right in this sort of a jurisdiction? Okay, to use a VPN. Do I have a right to download and use a VPN?
Yes. Now we come to my advice as a non-lawyer, and therefore not to be taken as professional legal advice. I will connect you with better friends to do that. But there is nothing in the law that prohibits either circumvention. In my reading, prohibits circumvention of censorship and or VPN. Right now. Let me be very, very clear about this, that this is a reading of the law, and sometimes the reading of the law is not enough in India, right? When only a certain set of websites were open to access for Kashmiris earlier this year, then people who were found by the police to have VPNs on their phone were beaten up on the road, right? So in these circumstances, like sometimes the law doesn't matter. Is perhaps the sadder answer to that question, but nothing to answer the question directly. Nothing in the law prohibits that. This was actually raised in the parliament, where if I recollect correctly, then the minister had answered that VPNs are not allowed, but that answer derived from no particular sort of law or regulation. And even now, I think lots of VPNs are accessible from Indian ISPs.
So this is my point, right? That I want to understand this. So if I, and completely hypothetically, if I were to log into Pornhub.com, okay, in the jurisdiction of this internet jurisdiction that comes into play here that prohibits it, right?
Yeah.
So now let me understand this. Now, Pornhub is banned because Geo decided it, or because the government has blocked it?
So the porn websites are blocked in India because of two different cases. I think one of them happened in the Uttarakhand High Court, and basically the courts informed the government that they want the website to be blocked, and the government then informed the ISPs to block the website. So currently, this is based on a certain court order.
So is it my understanding that it's basically a little bit absurd, because it's the way it works is for listing of websites. So as long as the website's on the list, it's blocked.
Yeah. Basically, all those.
So you can't generically block the idea of porn. You can just block a website. Yes.
That is absolutely the thing that should happen, and luckily has continued to happen, which is that, for example, after Pornhub.com was being blocked in India, Pornhub.com came up with Pornhub.org because they still wanted to serve sort of Indian consumers.
Sure.
And Pornhub.org is not blocked by ISPs. So
So
even though it's the same website, yeah.
No, because I'm just understanding, because I thought the idea of obscenity, right?
Yeah.
If you were to look at the idea of, of sort of what is the offending, if as an adult I watch pornography, okay, in the privacy of my own home, and there is no third party to be offended, then I'm not committing an offense, because the offense to actually happen, there has to be a third party that should be offended. So I have not committed an offense of obscenity. So so basically it's a moral order that the government has created that porn is not good for us. That's the issue. So now in that situation, if I exercise my right, which has not really been sort of articulated in Indian jurisprudence sufficiently enough, but I exercise my right as a consumer of the internet, right?
Yes.
And I buy a legitimate VPN and I pay for it. And that VPN allows me to bypass the government regulation and watch that website. Am I doing something illegal?
In my opinion, no, because okay, so let's come to pornography for a second, because this is a controversial, I think, topic.
Let's take another topic.
No. I just to make this clear, the IT Act is actually in text prohibiting accessing pornography. This is section 67A of the IT Act. That is even causing the act of transmitting pornography to be illegal. Several people have argued that this restriction is unconstitutional because
No, but transmitting is towards the provider, no, not me as a viewer.
I mean, considering how the internet would function, the website would transmit you that content, and since you are causing that content to be transmitted, you are committing something illegal in my reading of section 67A of the IT Act.
Transmitting is an agent of a broadcaster. How am I an agent of a broadcaster? This is absurd.
Yeah, but the language captures this absurd possibility, I think. And you're right. You framed it very, very correctly, which is, if I'm accessing pornography in the privacy of my home, right? And this is what sort of several legal scholars and lawyers will maintain as a position, that that's completely fine. But again, sometimes the wording of the law is in conflict with what we've sort of understood as common wisdom on the legality of pornography, I think.
There is a comment for you from Radhika. She says that finally governments also think that section 69A can be used to put blanket bans on the internet, complete internet shutdowns. Can you please comment on that?
Yes, that's a very good point. I think that section 69A has been used in the past to enact internet shutdowns, and section 144 has also been used to enact internet shutdowns. But after the telecom suspension of services rules came into being in 2018, if I recall correctly, then that particular document clearly says that, 2017, thanks Radhika, that basically the only authorization authority is what is listed there. So I would argue that after the notification of those rules, enacting internet shutdowns through section 69A or 144 of the CRPC should
2017 rules, Radhika said.
Yes, precisely. Yeah.
Thank you, Radhika.
It still happens though, Radhika. Yes, that's absolutely right. And I think perhaps one of the positive outcomes of Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India is a direction that we've talked about, which is that all such restrictions on freedom of expression should be reasoned well. They should be recorded in an order that is available for the public to challenge. I think that's a step in the right direction. But I mean, there are obvious criticisms of that judgment, but at least principally it makes that sound. Yeah.
I mean, see, I wanted to ask you also, like, to sort of paradigm shift. Okay, what does your understanding of how the government is trying to control what we can access and not access in the internet, through the internet, is also tells us about sort of what's happening, the sort of the government's game plan, a larger game plan towards, how does it fit in the larger game plan, considering we have a very right-wing, some would say fascist government, and with a lot of suppression of freedom. How would you frame it in that context?
Yes, I think all tools available to the government will be used in the way they want to use them, right? So the mistakes that have been made in the past when it comes to passing anti-terror legislation, which is so broad in its wording that you can put activists into jail for basically calling for a peaceful protest, right? Which we have seen happen repeatedly in the past. This is the same sort of wording which is now used to target websites, in my opinion. And for example, I have come across 2-3 websites that relate to documenting atrocities during the 1984 anti-Sikh riots, or documenting police brutality in Kashmir, for example. So I know 2 or 3 websites that have been blocked that document like instances like these. Therefore, the expanding definition of anti-national activities and terror activities, anti-social elements in society, etc., I think the same definition is applied online, and then that sort of content is blocked. And this was perhaps most famously done recently in the Akar Patel case, where it was very, very clear that the person was calling for a peaceful protest, right? And still Section 69A of the IT Act was used to take the content down.
We have a comment from, thanks so much for that, Gurshabad. Karan, actually from HasGeek, is several Twitter profiles have provided updates on Kashmir were also first withheld in India and then later fully suspended by Twitter.
Yes, absolutely. And hi, Karan. Karan and I used to work together at CIS. That's absolutely right. That's one of the cases where I have little clarity on, because informally the government was actually denying that they did any blocking, but so lots of Kashmiri profiles were blocked only for Indian users. So what these online platforms do is, if they receive a request to block content, their first thing is that if you're accessing it from an Indian ISP, then they not show the content to you, because they can detect your IP address, which sort of betrays to them your location in a way. And this is a way of knowing that basically it was blocked on government orders, right? Because it's accessible from other countries. But the government was denying in that case. I think I'd love to learn more about that particular instance as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, please finish your point. Sorry.
Definitive answers are not possible because of the opaqueness in the law. I think that's the unfortunate part. Yeah.
Radhika has just really frightened me by saying that VPNs will be blocked in India as soon as Pakistan will follow Pakistan's sort of route. What do you think? Can you block VPN? Will there be a super VPN, like a VPN for a VPN?
So services like Tor are very difficult to block. I mean, the government does not have the infrastructure to do that, because as I said, unlike Iran and China, where all network is passing through, almost all network is passing through certain nodes, right? And for China, we call it the Great Firewall of China, for example. India does not have such a network architecture in terms of how the ISPs interconnect, etc. So this is difficult to do in itself, and it becomes even more difficult because you're expecting then 100 ISPs to do it, and you do not have some central way of blocking it. So I am hopeful that even if the government comes up with regulations to prohibit the use of VPNs, I think the implementation of it will be so weak, in my opinion, that it's impractical.
So I was wondering, while the government uses all of these terms and things to sort of go after certain websites, but just so like all the streaming content we watch, like Netflix, Hotstar, YouTube, it is full of political content. It is full of sexual content, which otherwise would never have permission to be shown in the country. and it escapes all kinds of censorship. Everybody's watching it across the country. So how does these large streaming networks sort of manage to serve as exceptions to the rule?
I think there's so much
Content.
that it's infeasible for the government to know all of it, and therefore it gets through. Now one can discuss whether this has positive ramifications or negative ramifications for like the exercise of speech and democracy in India in general. But so last year we put out an analysis of transparency reports that are put out by Facebook, Google, etc. So these reports tell you how much the government is requesting them to take down content, or through surveillance laws, telling them to share information on users like you and me with the government. And we have found this number to be increasing every single year now.
Can you give us some statistics?
Yeah, I'll have to open that up, but I think after we published that report, it sort of reached its apex already, which is
roughly,
I think,
like how many requests are made for individual users by the government to Facebook, for example, in the year 2018?
Cool. I'll look that approximate figure up. I think it's around at least in 4,000 or 5,000. Right?
Oh wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. So that means a huge number of people are sitting in the government offices somewhere monitoring our content.
Yeah, I was wrong. I was way wrong. So in Jan to June 2018, there were over 20,000 requests for user data.
User
data, yeah.
By the government of India.
And this is to just Facebook, yeah.
So somebody in the government office, in the government of India office, has collected 20,000 profile accounts in over a 6-month period and submitted them to Facebook. How many people?
No. Yeah, so I think they also may be phrasing. Sorry, could you repeat that?
How many people would be required to do that kind of work, just logistically?
So I think one possibility is that they just pass very broad orders, right? So anyone, basically any investigation that is going on, or you give us their everything you have on them, sort of thing, or any parties named in this case, right? Anyone under suspicion. So basically, one request can even have multiple parties named in it. So and we have to sort of take into account how many currently law enforcement agencies are authorized to do this. So it's in a liberal reading of Section 79 of the IT Act, that means all police departments, all are like central intelligence agencies, all intelligence agencies, so like the intelligence bureaus at the state levels, etc., etc. So there are just a humongous number of law enforcement agencies itself. So it might be that those things may explain the huge numbers, I think. And as I said, these numbers are only increasing each year. So
I've learned a lot. I think we have Radhika and Karan. Would you guys like to ask another question? And we have some other. I mean, I can't see all the names of the people who are watching us on live streaming, but Ambika, David, Dushyant, Sneha. Any questions, guys? Okay, I think that's a no. So I think,
yeah, just one note I'd like to end with, which is perhaps also was in the first slide, right? When Section 96 of the CRPC, which allows you to challenge book bans, right? It allows you to challenge book bans if you're an interested party. Okay, so it's not just Periyar who would challenge the book ban. It's also people in Uttar Pradesh who can challenge the book ban if they feel they want to read that particular book, right? And legal reform perhaps also comes only through action and litigation. So Internet Freedom Foundation is doing great work in this field. SFLC India, CCG, and CIS. I think you should follow these, and feel free to always reach out to me or discuss these issues, because we need to also challenge these powers so that we do have an opportunity of hearing. We do have the right to access content, and the government should justify any time it wants to restrict freedom of speech.
Thanks a lot, Gurshabad. That was really amazing. That was really incredible. I think, I hope you keep doing this kind of work. It's really important work. And keep marrying this idea of technology and internet. And I think you really kind of, in many ways, you're right. I think maybe the real battle for free speech is being fought in the internet space. and I think it has a lot of ramifications for our lives in a daily ways. Guys, thank you so much for attending, and everybody else who's watching us on YouTube and Facebook Live. Thank you so much for coming on a Monday evening and joining us on a regular Monday evening.